Good morning, good morning, good morning. Drinking some coffee. It's 5:37 a.m. I woke up around 4 something. I think I slept kind of early though. I don't know. I couldn't sleep though this morning, so I just decided I might as well get up because I'm already up. So I ended up getting up around 5ish. This is not bragging. I'm not like I, I don't sleep well. So I kind of have this mindset where it's like if I'm already up, I'd rather just get up, use the energy I have early versus lounging around and lounging around. Like I don't really feel like that's gonna help because it doesn't really help me. Um, I'd rather just get up, hydrate, have some coffee, get going, and see where my energy takes me. Today I'm trying to fit in a workout, and I got a bunch of stuff to do, and class and another class. So yeah, I've got a lot to prepare for. Interviewing Monday. Trying to plan out the weekend a little bit, but I wanted to talk about prayer while I'm drinking this coffee this morning. I kind of wanted to get into the topic of prayer. Now, from the last couple episodes I post, you probably realized, I'm not Muslim. I was not raised Muslim. I was raised where I grew up around a close Muslim friend in junior high and high school. We kind of stayed in touch in college. I met some other Muslim friends in college. And, there was not really a lot of talk about the differences of religion so much. But I just kind of recognized more how it was hanging out. Like, I don't know, there was one point in community college where it was some of the kids from my Adventist church, the ones of us who didn't go to the Adventist colleges or universities. There was a pretty solid group of us that traditionally, during that time, things were shifting with people, and just in the denomination of Adventism in general, people were making choices of stepping out from the Adventist education system with the expense of it, and things were shifting. Like people were, the church was kind of like confused as to like why don't we have youth, or past high school, why do people stop coming to church? And I kind of had some insight into that. And I don't know if my attitude or my sense of humor back then was very I don't know. I feel like the delivery was kind of rough because I was not sure of myself, pretty uncomfortable speaking up, but I would speak up a lot, and so it would kind of come out like sarcastic or a little like blunt. Um, but nevertheless, I was able to, express some of my opinions, and when one of my long-term youth and collegiate age range, pastors was leaving, he was like, why don't people come to church, at this age range? And I kind of noticed some things because I was like, first of all, in the Adventist system, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to talk about prayer as well. But first of all, in the Adventist system, culturally, in the education system, people usually go to, if not Adventist high schools, they'll go to Adventist colleges or universities. That wasn't very uncommon back then, where people did that. They wanted to be educated through their religion, or their families wanted that for them. But are the Adventist universities and colleges really, and high schools and stuff, are they really competitive? Like Loma Linda University, I think is. I don't know about the others. I'm not saying they're bad schools. Like colleges are colleges. Um, like you still get valid degrees and everything. Um, but it's very unique. Like even the applications, I remember them with a grad application I put in. They were you kind of have to do a pledge. At least back then, you had to write a pledge form saying that you weren't going to do certain types of things that weren't even like illegal things. It was just according to the religion. You weren't going to be like smoking or drinking, or like you were going to like try to like, you know, do things like religiously. But those environments also, attract a lot of rebellion. Because I feel like when I grew up in school, it was like there were the kids who were like would adhere to the church and be like try to follow it, and then I was kind of more in a group that was more like, we weren't like rebels, we weren't doing that much bad stuff, but we would maybe cuss, or some people tried weed or tried cigarettes or alcohol like in high school, and like some people had like premarital sex. Like it was just, you know and they were still going to like Adventist schools, a lot of them, and some of them weren't. But I feel like, at my church, when they asked, why don't people come either in that 20 something age range, in their 20s, early 30s, and I was like, well, there's nothing for us here. Like once you leave high school, there was no collegiate group until they created one, because usually the college students would go away. They would go away to school, and so there was no one leading the groups, like, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors that went to college, or who went to community college, transferred to a college university, 4-year school, were gonna get a bachelor's degree. You know, there was nobody, you know, and we weren't gonna lead ourselves necessarily. Like, we took roles where we would volunteer and stuff, but there was nothing in place until, I don't know if they listened to me or if they realized it or what, but something came into place sometime after I mentioned that, and they allowed us to kind of have a group, for the first time that I remember ever seeing a group of like college age people. And so a lot of us were from different churches too, and we would kind of mingle around with other people our age. A lot of people started going to community colleges and local colleges and weren't really like into the Adventist system so much. And so a lot of us were around in LA, and we had cars, some of us, and we could get around by that time. And so you know we went basically, and we would talk to like we would talk to other kids, because there were other kids at the community college, and a lot of us joined this group, Mesa, Math, Engineering, Science, something like that, Math, Engineering, and Science Association, or something like that. A lot of us were in that group, and it was just this room where a lot of the people in math and engineering and science, would go. They could study. There were projects people could do, but it was like an open, like it was like a lab kind of room, but it was kind of social and kind of open, like almost all the time. And so a lot of us started getting into that group, and within that group, there were a lot of people from India, a lot of people from some other, like Pakistan, India, some Asian countries, some Middle Eastern countries, some African countries, um, there are a lot of like immigrant students, like first generation like immigrant students, English speaking, who, they're in college, and they're studying like in science and math and those and engineering. A lot of people were in different branches of engineering, and you know just I got to know some Hindu people, some Muslim people. Like we kind of knew what religion each other was, but it was never like arguments or anything like that. But one thing that I did notice that I found inspiring, which is why I mentioned all this, just to come to say that I kind of liked hanging out with that group. It was, people were nice, people were mature, people could joke around, people had a laugh, people developed relationships and got together. People were, you know, um, just very. It was a nice group of people to be around, and I think just knowing that there were people who were practicing their religion. Like I remember we would, we were college students, so we wouldn't like avoid doing certain stuff, but like there's a lot of stuff that we didn't do. Like, the Adventists weren't necessarily into bars and clubs. A lot of these other guys weren't really into bars and clubs. But we would go eat, or we'd go to like fast food or McDonald's or whatever. And I would see like the Hindu kids, they would order food, but they wouldn't order the meat. They'd order like a burger but no meat, or like a burrito with like nothing, nothing meat based. They were always ordering like vegetarian and vegan style foods, even though it wasn't like at a restaurant that was vegetarian. Like McDonald's isn't vegetarian, Del Taco isn't vegetarian. Like they're, of course it was fast food. Like it was like wherever we could walk to, from the campus, so there was fast food around, and just like sandwich shops, coffee shops, a couple restaurants, but in the interest of time, we didn't really tend to, sit down at restaurants too much. Um, there were some friends I would have lunch with and stuff, but we didn't really tend to sit down at restaurants too much. Um, and I mean, we would make plans on the weekends sometimes and like meet up in the city and like maybe have dinner like that. But, a lot of people had to be home. I remember some of the females had to be home earlier, and there was never really drinking, not much. I remember maybe going to like a Denny's or a Norm's once, and like maybe somebody ordering like a beer or something. Um, and I just feel like um, it was just nice to be around people that you know were kind of like openly practicing their religion, but not like in a pushy way. They weren't trying to like convert people. They just did their own thing. And it was like everybody was like that. Everyone had their own religious ways. And there were people around that would like, tell. I remember this one guy who was kind of just always telling like dirty jokes or like whatever. And like, he was nice. Like, he was fun. Like, we went to high school together. And then, you know, so we ended up in community college together too. And he was kind of like joking all the time. And, we went out a lot. We would just go out around town, like go to the beach, like whatever. Like it was, we were in college, but it wasn't really out of hand. Then a lot of, like, almost all of us lived at home with our parents. Um, Parents from different religions, from different countries. It was just an interesting, I mean, that's LA for you, But it was just an interesting time, because I was always raised around an environment where people would talk about, you got to send your kids to Adventist schools because, they're gonna, lose their way if they're not in an Adventist school. But like I said, like when you're in an Adventist school with other Adventists, there is that kind of like, there's the pressure to either be in the groups that are like following the religion, or the pressure to be in the groups that are kind of like rebellious. And like, I think there's something about it that kind of like, it's not like you're cooler or like something like that, but it's just kind of this like, I don't know, around that age you kind of want to have your own personality, and you don't want to be like, oh, I'm following the herd, like you don't really want to be like feeling like I'm following the herd, like when you're in your 20s and stuff, you're still kind of like developing your own like sense of like, okay, maybe what did I grow up with? And there's still that kind of like, everything I was taught in childhood is right, and I need to just do what my parents taught me because I'm an adult now. And then there's stuff that you see or learn that you're like, well, maybe some of that stuff wasn't good or healthy, or maybe I'd rather do it this way, or maybe I actually believe this, or maybe this is something I actually want to practice more than that. And I kind of noticed for myself that started happening maybe at a little later age. Like, I think I didn't like follow, but like for the most part, up until like through grad school, I was pretty much like, not all grad school, but while I was living in LA, I don't remember if I was really smoking. Like, I had access to smoking, like weed. It wasn't legal back then, but it's not like I never dabbled and never tried smoking any of it. But I never like was just like regularly smoking. I'd probably tried alcohol. But I wasn't like drinking necessarily. Like, I wouldn't like go out for the purpose of drinking or go out for the purpose of smoking. It was like we would just go out and eat basically, and it was usually church group people, and there were people that were even stricter than I was, and so we kind of held to the strictest person's methods of living. They wouldn't go to like certain movies, so we rarely even went to like movies with everybody, because certain people didn't go to rated R movies or movies with any violence or profanity. I think I mentioned once that when we went as a church group once, not as a church event, but as a church, as a group of people from that church, quite a few people walked out of the movie. I don't know what it was. It was some weird movie where like there was like a lot of action, but there was a lot of comedy too, and it was like violence with action and comedy, and they didn't find it funny. It was like kind of like, you know, comedy where they're like, you know, people exposing their genitals and cursing, and there's probably some boobs in there. Like, I don't remember what the movie was. I don't know if The Rock was in it. I think maybe Mark Wahlberg was in it. I really don't remember. It was so long ago. And I remember we were sitting kind of up front because we got bad seats because we weren't there on time. And yeah, we ended up getting bad seats, and we were up in the front. And then I noticed little by little, our group was missing a little more, a little more, a little more. And this was well into the movie. It was probably like an hour or so into the movie. But I don't know what I think. It was just kind of like, I remember feeling like a little offended. I remember feeling like they think they're better than us, that's why they left, kind of thing. But when I think of it, I was like, I wasn't really into the movie either. It's just kind of like I paid, But you can always, I think you can get your money back if you go to a movie and it's like, I think if you're not halfway through it or something, I don't know what the rules are anymore, but I think you could get your money back if you don't finish a movie. Or you could get like a ticket to like come back another day or something. Mm. At least back then that was the case. I don't know now. But yeah, I remember them having this. I remember them having left. Like, they were in the lobby. They stayed. and then the rest of us just stayed for the whole movie. It wasn't a good movie at all, but it was like, there were some laughs in there, but yeah, I could see why, people who are religious weren't really into it. Um, but I don't know. I feel like when I was around the non-Adventist people, I felt like there was more respect for people's religions. And then when I was with the Adventist people, I felt like there was more, um, I guess, not, I mean, there was judgment, but more like, I don't know, like when people practiced, the Adventist stuff, it just, I don't know. I don't know why I always felt like it was different from maybe when I saw my Hindu or Muslim friends doing their, just usually it was with food. Like usually that was the biggest thing was with food was like the not drinking, the not eating pork or not eating meat or not eating shrimp or like different things like because you would see okay we go out to eat and everyone would kind of eat differently and but nobody was like I can't go to that restaurant because they serve meat or I can't go there because of like this or that reason. It was like people would still participate and show up but they didn't go to the like they didn't go past a certain point. And I guess maybe that was my difference with Adventism, with the people who I knew that were like pretty strict with it, is that they would never even go to certain places. They would never even be interested in like events at bars or clubs or movies or whatever. Like there were certain places where like we almost never went to bars, clubs, or movies. Like those three things were almost never. And with the other group, I don't think we really did that either. It wasn't. It was just not something we spent our time and money doing. But I guess some reason I kind of felt different about it. Maybe because those were places I liked to go. I went to movies all the time. Like pretty much every movie that was new, that was within something I'd want to watch. Not just like some random slow drama or like something, but most of the big screen kind of like action, like Mission Impossible, James Bond, like whatever kind of movies, like the ones you want to see in the theater, I would usually see those. I had some friends that we would go to the movies all the time, especially if it was like sci-fi, fantasy, um, techie stuff, like a little bit of thrillers here and there. Sometimes comedy, sometimes drama, but usually it was like the ones that you get the most uh, entertainment from it being on a screen. Because dramas and comedies, you can still kind of watch them from home and you don't really need the effect of like the surround sound, big screen kind of thing. Like it doesn't really enhance it that much more, I don't think. But yeah, definitely movies. And I was raised in a household where, my dad was pretty strict about movies. Like, he didn't want us watching anything with profanity. And I remember him bringing it up once, like, you guys are baptized and you're watching this kind of thing. And, like, so we just wouldn't watch it around him. But, you know, it was something that I learned very early. Like, my dad doesn't like shows with profanity or whatever, like any kind of negativity. Like we were watching Madeline once, a cartoon version of Madeline, and you know how the nuns weren't like nice to the orphans or whatever, and I guess one of them was like pulling the ear of Madeline, or like she was getting like disciplined for some reason or another. And that scene, my dad saw that and he's like, "What are you guys watching?" kind of thing, like kind of like meaning like turn it off. Um, and so he would just kind of be a little not happy about that kind of stuff. And, you know, like being in LA is like you're around, movies, entertainment, like a lot. Like it's everywhere. Like the whole, you know, city is like entertainment based. It is not hard to find entertainment, even for free. Even now, even with the economy as it is, there's still stuff you can go to for free with no cover at a certain time, and like even free snacks or whatever. Like you'll probably have to pay for a drink or pay for food eventually, but it's free otherwise. Or maybe you'll have to pay parking. Um, but yeah, like I grew up around a bit of strictness around kind of like like content that you consume, and most of it was on TV. And so, because back then, like people weren't really having smartphones and their own private devices, so like when you were watching something, other people could see it. It's not like now how you can just be on Instagram, like watching privately your own thing, and nobody knows what you're watching unless you share it or whatever. Um, so, I think it's gotten a little more complicated for people, um, because there is this kind of like privacy that people get. Like before, we used to have a computer, a desktop. We still have one in the living room, and it's like people can see what you're looking at. I mean, of course, nobody's like staring over your shoulder, like watching what you're doing, but it's like you're in a public space, so there's only so much you're gonna really see. But and back then we didn't really even like delete our browser histories, and so sometimes certain things would come up. Or like I remember when I would use some of my guy friends' computers, like back in the day when you put in the search bar, when you would like put something in the search bar, and it would kind of like show some stuff that other people had been typing. Um, like I wasn't nosy like that, but it was kind of like, you're around people, you're gonna like figure out a little bit, like, we were a little bit involved in each other's lives growing up like that. Um, but I just always found it interesting, that there was definitely that difference between the Adventist Christians and the other religious people, um, like of the stuff that they maybe didn't do. I feel like the other people of the other religions didn't really, like, other than the fact that they had to be home early, that was probably what stopped us from going to a lot of places, because it's like you can't really do much if you've got to be home by 10. It's like, so, or 9 or whatever time. Like I had some friends that had to be home pretty early. um I didn't really have a time I had to be home early. It was like probably midnight ish, but I mean, I just didn't really have a reason to be staying out that late. But we could stay out late. A lot of times what we would do is we would get home, and then we would park in front of the house and just like sit in the car and chill for a couple hours. So like I might not come in till like 2 o'clock, but like I've been home since like 11 or something like that. And so we would chill extra hours, but we'd like hang out in the car and talk, or hang out in the parking lot and like talk for a while. And we do that a lot. We just like chill and talk in the car. And like probably at least once a week, we do that, like a group of friends. And it was usually Friday nights or Saturday nights. So we didn't really go to like we didn't really go anywhere. But I remember my dad was always like snooping around and like wondering what we're doing in the car and stuff, and like he was always like trying to be suspicious and nosy. But literally, we were just talking, like we weren't even doing anything. But it would get foggy, but like I'd see him going out there looking like he was like taking out the trash or whatever. But I don't know. Like, I think there's a difference too when you're living with your family and with your parents, and you're like in your 20s. Like, there's a lot of stuff that, unless your parents just fully leave you alone, there's a lot of, you just don't get that level of privacy that you would if you were living like in the dorms or in your own apartment, or something like that. Like in the dorms at a religious school, it's actually pretty strict usually. Um, but yeah, I don't really know. Um, but yeah, I I was never like into those schools too much. Like they weren't. I don't know. Part of me wanted to go because that was the tradition, and then once I realized, how things were, in my early college days, without going to that type of school, I was actually glad that I never went. Because I got to meet so many different types of people with different thinking. And again, like these Adventist schools, other than like Loma Linda and La Sierra, they're usually out in the middle of nowhere, kind of. So it's not like you're in a college town where you're like, it's not like UCLA or USC where there's like stuff there where you can like go out on the weekends. Like you can go out, but it's like you gotta like have a car to like travel down a mountain, or like, you gotta like get out of the area. Like it's usually in like a little bit of a rural region, um, a little more secluded. Not like completely in the middle of nowhere, but you probably have at least a 20-minute drive till you get to like a main area. Other than unlike living in like LA where you're like literally in the middle of the city all the time. But um, so yeah, like it's kind of interesting. Like I didn't really grow up around a lot of people um, who were outwardly like praying a lot. Like I think within the religion, we would probably pray at church, all the time for before, maybe like before and after we start a a meeting. Um, we would usually have to pray. Um, and then so that was like before and after, and then we would usually like maybe if we went out to eat, someone might pray for a meal. I still have friends that pray when we go out to eat food. Um, but other than that, there was no like set prayer time. We were always taught about prayer, like a lot of um, the readings, I guess, in the well, not readings, but a lot of the meetings we had, you know, they would kind of encourage us to like read the Bible or read the lessons, because Adventist churches have these quarterlies. They call them quarterlies. Like every quarter, every 13 weeks or so, you get a quarterly, which is it's like a study guide that has like a weekly lesson plan. So every week you're studying like a topic that's based in religion, and it usually has some scattered Bible verses where they're just like talking and like citing scripture and like, oh, like you should pray or whatever. I don't know. Like those are weird to me. I feel like they're not very thought provoking. Like I've read through some more recently. You can get them free online, like the Adventist Quarterly. I don't know, depending on your age range, they have different types of, you know, material. But even if I look at, say, if I look at the one for this week, if I just, I don't have the app right now, I don't think, but, and then I want to talk about this video and about prayer in general. But I'm just talking about my background with things. Sabbath School Quarterly lesson. So Sabbath.school. I don't know. Sabbath school quarterly lesson. So it always has these creepy pictures. Go to all lessons from this quarter. I don't want it from this whole quarter. It has a picture on the front of fire or angels, some winged creatures. I think they're like winged angels with swords. I mean, you know how people depict angels with like they look like a human body with like wings, kind of flying around, wearing like a robe or something and carrying a sword. So if I look at, let me see. There's so many links. This is weird. Okay. Quarterly PDF. Yeah, I really don't want to read this whole thing. But today I'm recording, it's April 12th. So let's see. It goes from about March 30th all the way to June 28th. So that's the quarter, yeah, and it's 13. They have 13 Sabbaths listed, or 13 weeks listed. The second lesson, so this is the second week of the quarter. And these are, I don't think these have like a significance, like religiously, like which week and all that kind of stuff. I just think they go maybe by the new year and they're like, this is the second quarter. Like you're just kind of like noticing that like, okay, this is a new quarter. It's not like the Jewish Parsha where it's like really kind of like based on like a lunar cycle and everything. Like this is just, I think it just starts in January and just keeps going every 13th week. At our church, every 13th week we would have communion, where you do it would be grape juice and some kind of unleavened bread or crackers that were not leavened that would get blessed. And you would take that, body and blood of Christ, do this in remembrance of me, and then you would, they had foot washing as well. I think they did the foot washing first. And then it says the central issue, this is for this week's lesson, love or selfishness. So that's April 6 through 12. So if you go to page 18, and I guess the whole main point is the great controversy. So if you follow the story about the great controversy, when I was looking at the Quran, I think it's in there as well, when it talks about, Satan doing what he was doing, or Iblis doing what he was doing, like in heaven, and then I don't know. It had some complicated explanation about like that, like how angels can't do certain things and humans can do certain things. Like it was like distinguishing between, that they can't really sin, or like they can't, like basically I guess the way Christianity teaches about that great controversy is different from Islam. I don't know the details, but basically in Christianity, if you read The Great Controversy by Ellen G. White, it basically seems to say that, Satan left heaven. Maybe I'll study that this weekend. That Satan left from heaven, or was banished for like the jealousy or whatever that he had towards the angel Michael, which Adventists believe it's Jesus, and other denominations don't all believe that. I don't even know how they say that the angel Michael is Jesus. I don't even understand that. Like, I don't. Like, I'm not saying it in a way to be like, oh, like, I don't understand it. Like, it's wrong. I'm just saying I don't understand where that conclusion comes from. There's a lot of stuff I just don't understand. Like, the more I dive into, like, the background, the backbone of stuff, and the history of stuff, like all the stuff about, I thought it was only the Adventists that had that the Great Disappointment in 1844, uh, but I didn't know there were a lot of religions that came out of that. Adventism came out of that too, but so did Mormons and I think Jehovah's Witnesses. And so it's kind of scary to think. I'm like, okay, and then they backtracked and were kind of like, oh, like this is where God starts uh, something about, I don't even remember, like some curtain or like the counting of the sins or something. Like there's something that was supposed to start end times related, in 1844, October 22nd of 1844 or whatever. Um, but that's how, a lot of other religions came out of that Bible. I guess people were interpreting something in the Bible as like Jesus was coming, the second coming was going to happen on October 22nd of 1844 because of some mathematical or uh, prophecy, some prophecy calculations that people made based on reading all this stuff, and like there was some kind of way to like figure out, I guess numerically, like which days it was supposed to be. And then when Jesus didn't come, people were like, oh, it actually meant something else, and nobody knows the day or the hour, and like we misinterpreted. Actually, this other thing was happening at this time. Um, and that's not what it was. It was actually this other thing. And I never understood how they came about those dates. I heard it. I was taught it, like this is what happened, but I was never told like here's a whiteboard and how we figured out like this is what was happening. This is actually what was happening in 1844 according to like Daniel and Revelation and all these other prophecies. Um so I don't really know. I don't really know where that comes from. I don't know where that comes from. I don't even know if it's accurate because not all denominations believe it. So it's kind of like I don't really know if there's a lot of accuracy in that. So I don't really pay much attention to certain stuff where it's like I don't really know where they got these numbers and where they got these like ideas from. And it's kind of like with the Great Controversy, it's almost the same thing. It's like, where did this idea come from? But it's not the only, Adventism isn't the only denomination that talks about, the Great Controversy and some kind of idea of Satan being in heaven and how he got to earth and was given dominion or whatever. Like, um, but I would like to compare maybe, I don't know if I would really do it this weekend, but I'm thinking about that would be a cool project for this weekend is comparing what the Quran says to what Ellen G. White's book, The Great Controversy, says. But, okay, I was going to look at this thing. So, goodness. Okay, so this, just to give an example, and I'll post a link to this Sabbath School Quarterly. Lesson 2 is April 6th through 12. It says the central issue, love or selfishness. I'm not going to read this whole thing. And just to show, like, it has, like, Sabbath afternoon. It basically has the lesson for Sabbath afternoon, which basically you start reading this technically Saturday after church. And so it says, read for this week's study. And just to show how they break down the verses, it's like Luke 19:14 to 41. Matthew 23:37 and 38. Hebrews 11:35 through 38. Revelation 2:10. Acts 2:44 through 47. And John 13:35. Now, I don't really like how they do this. I've never liked when people just take like a little bit of a verse or like a couple little verses and then they're like, here's a Bible study, and then you don't really have the whole background, but they have a memory text from Isaiah 41:10 from the New King James. It says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Now, what I would like is to see how all this stuff is even connected. Um, and at the bottom it says, "Study this week's lesson based on the Great Controversy, chapters 1 through 2, to prepare for Sabbath, April 13th." And this is what would be read on the 6th, would have been read on April 6th, according to this lesson guide. But April 13th is technically tomorrow, which is Saturday, at the time when I'm recording this. And it basically talks about, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes these lessons aren't very, like, insightful, but it talks about Matthew 24:2. "Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." And then, I mean, Jesus says that before his crucifixion, when he's in the temple near Passover. I don't know if it's on Passover or near Passover, before Passover. But it says the disciples are confused, and so are you. What could Jesus possibly mean by these words? And it kind of goes into some explanation about last day events in the context of Jerusalem's fall. And then at the last paragraph here, it says, "We will study Satan's twofold strategy, both to deceive and destroy God's people. What the evil one fails to accomplish through persecution, he hopes to achieve through compromise. God is never caught by surprise, and even in the most challenging times, he preserves his people." So that's just an overview of what Saturday's lesson would have looked like last week. And then Sunday, the heartbroken Savior. Monday, April 8th, would have been Christians providentially preserved, faithful amid persecution, caring for the community, a legacy of love, and then further thought. And then it goes into Faithful Gymnast in Italy, a story by Andrew McChesney. And it basically is probably a story of some gymnast in Italy that followed their faith or something. I don't really know. I never read the story, but that's kind of how these things go. And there's these lessons with all these questions at the end of the lessons each day, and it's like a Bible study laid out for you. So the Adventist world kind of has that, and you're kind of taught, to study and pray throughout the week. So there is material like that where you could study if you don't know what to study. And then usually at church, it might not be the topic at church, but in Sabbath school, you might be talking about it if your church is actually going through the quarterly. And then at, I guess in, there's not, other than the Lord's Prayer or maybe learning some, like the 23rd Psalm or some other things that you kind of learn. In Adventism, there's not really a prayer, like, specific method. You're just kind of taught about it, and there's not really like a specific method to it. You kind of just pray. You're always taught, bow your head, close your eyes, fold your hands, maybe even, or kneel Sometimes, in church you'll kneel, or at home you can kneel. Um, I mean, we learned about prostration and different types of bowing and things like that. Like it's not something that you never hear, because like when you're studying in the Bible and like at the church and stuff, or even at home, it does talk about prostration. Or when somebody fell on their face, that happens a lot. People falling on their faces. We used to laugh at that when we were younger, because like, you just laugh at things that sound funny, and we're like, oh, they fell on their face, like, but we kind of knew what it meant. It was like some form of like worship or like respect. Usually when like an angel was coming or something, or some event, something happened where people would be falling on their faces. It's like, that's not a style of prayer where you're standing, right? It's something where you are either bowing down or throwing yourself down quickly. Like, you kind of see it in movies about like ancient kings and stuff, in the European world, where it's like, the king comes by and people take a knee, or they bow, or they just like completely just like fall down and bow, like out of fear or respect. Like, that's kind of a practice that, outside of some religions with prayer, I think that's kind of a practice that is almost lost. Like, there is some remnant of it, like even in Jewish prayer. So there's this Jewish prayer I wanted to talk about, and I'm gonna post it below. The YouTuber's name, this video was posted in June 19th of 2008. It's called Jewish Prayer. It's by Mid-East American, and as far as I recall, he's Jewish. And it says, I'll post the link, but it was controversial. I remember when I first came across this video way back in the day, and it was newer then when I came across it, and this guy, there was a lot in the comments that were kind of like, what are you doing? Like, you sound like your Hebrew sounds like, they were like ridiculing his Hebrew, and that he was like bowing and even practicing prostration, and they were like, it's too Muslim kind of thing. But it's kind of interesting, because when I read the comments way back, this is like, how long ago is 2008? When I read the comments way back, people were ridiculing more, and I just happened to look into the comments, and there's still there's comments, even like recent comments. I'm like, whoa, this is from 2008 and people are still commenting on it. But it was a little more like Muslim people commenting on it, I feel like. It says, no, not everything done in this clip is obligatory. I made this clear in the annotations. If someone is confused or misled because he did not read, that is not my fault. Read. And it says, in our days, there are not many Jews who still kneel and bow during regular daily prayer. A noticeable number of Orthodox Ashkenazi Jews do bow to the ground during Yom HaKippurim and Rosh Hashanah. Is Yom HaKippurim the same thing as Yom Kippur? I don't know, because it looks like it might say Purim. I don't know. Most Jews are not even aware that such is the historical practice of the Jewish people, to kneel and prostrate during regular daily prayer. Now, okay, I'm not going to talk too much about that, because I don't know all the details about the history of Jewish prayer, but I do know that there are times where they say Baruch atah Adonai, and I've talked about it before, where people bow at the hips and then they kind of like bend at the knee, but they're not bowing. It almost represents like the movements you would make if you were going to kneel. So if you were going to get into a position where you kneel to the ground, you would probably bend forward a little bit first and then bring your knees to the ground. So I am thinking that came from that came from that maybe people did used to practice it that way. There was some comment that talked about, it was a style of temple prayer, and since there's no temple 2,000 years ago, like there's a comment in there that's talking about how 2,000 years ago, after the, you know, since the temple's been destroyed, like people kind of just lost that style of prayer. I don't know if Amida means standing. I can't remember if that is accurate. Don't quote me on that. But if I didn't have the sound on, I don't know if I would first notice that this guy praying in this video was not doing a Muslim prayer. Like, it's not exactly the same as Muslims do it, but it doesn't look like what you usually see Jewish people doing. And Jewish prayers are like 3 times a day. You can get a prayer book. Like, I have one here. I had an old one. It was a Koran sitter. This is an Art Scroll weekday sitter, and it's small, paperback, Ashkenaz version. And it doesn't, I don't think it has the Shabbat prayers. It just has the stuff you do during the week. And then it has the other holiday stuff like Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, Hanukkah, Purim. It has Mincha, Marv, Chakras for weekdays. Upon rising, it has all the blessings. It has death and bereavement, Salichos. I don't know what this other stuff is. It has the Torah readings, the weekly portions, I guess. Rosh Chodesh and Hanukkah and Purim, fast day, Tisha B'Av. It has all the Psalms in there, but it's all in Hebrew. It has laws, and it has Kaddish transliteration, Kaddish transliterated. And it's lengthy. Like, I can't imagine praying this. I mean, even if I just read the English, it takes ages to finish praying this whole thing. It's like tons and tons and tons of praying in this book. But yeah, I'll post a link to that video that I'm talking about. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail because I think it's really interesting to just watch and kind of see what the comments say, read what he wrote, follow up on some of his other video content. It's interesting stuff, but I don't really want to speak too much on it without people having watched it first, because then it's like spoiler. But I'll post that Adventist thing too if people have an interest in looking at that. I might look at the Great Controversy material for the weekend. I don't really know what I'm going to be studying over this weekend. It is too early for me to be deciding. But I'll post all this. It's 6:36 a.m. right now. I really just wanted to get a recording in. I might end up going back to sleep after I eat breakfast. It's too early, honestly. But, alright guys, hopefully you have a good weekend, a fun Friday. Hopefully if I can post this early, it'll be up early for people who maybe want to start their day out. If you're driving to work, maybe listen to this, who knows. But I hope it's interesting. I'm gonna post the links and try to post this up this morning before I get into breakfast.